I sold my only wedding ring to help pay for my granddaughter's birthday party. But on that day, my son told me to sit near the grill. A stranger leaned in and asked, "Are you the nanny?" He stayed silent. No one spoke up. No one looked back. My old age began at that moment when blood turned its back, and a girl once without a country became the only one to call me mother. If you think this is just another family story, you're wrong. Hit subscribe now so you won't miss the haunting and powerful family films we bring you next. The scent of barbecue clung to the air like an afterthought. Sweet, smoky, intrusive. The kind of smell that stuck to your hair and your memories whether you wanted it to or not. It was Ava's first birthday. They'd rented a large backyard venue in the suburbs, complete with white canopies, folding chairs with golden sashes, balloon garlands in pastel pinks and yellows, and a cotton candy machine operated by a bored teenager scrolling through his phone. Esther Myles arrived 15 minutes early. She wore her best dress, a faded cream wrap with delicate embroidery that she'd once worn to her late husband's retirement party. The fabric was thin around the elbows, now the stitching looser at the waist. She wore it anyway. Carefully ironed it that morning. A tiny scent of lavender still clung to the hem. Her hair was in a bun. Silver pin tucked firmly. Lipstick on. Just enough rouge to seem alive, but not enough to call attention. In her hand, a small box wrapped in yellow tissue. Inside it, a silver bracelet with a clasp shaped like a star. And a note, handwritten. She'd rewritten it 3 times before settling. For my Ava. One day you'll grow up and forget this day. But I won't. I gave up something very precious to help make it happen. Love always, Grandma Esther. She walked past the balloon archway unannounced but not uninvited. There were people milling around Jared's friends, Lena's side of the family, co-workers in blazers trying to look casual. Everyone was busy talking, sipping sparkling water or wine from paper cups, plates already stacked with sliders and fruit skewers. Esther looked for her son. She spotted him by the drinks table. Tan slacks, pastel pink shirt, a little too tight around the middle. Jared had always been handsome in that way. Politicians were square-jawed. Confident smiled, a little too polished to be trusted. He was laughing with someone. His back was turned. She hesitated, and then he saw her. A brief flicker of recognition, a smile that didn't quite reach the eyes. "Mom," he said, walking over. "You're here." "You invited me," she said softly. "Yeah. I just didn't know you'd actually come." He chuckled like he'd told a joke she didn't understand. "I wouldn't miss it," she replied, holding out the small gift box. "For Ava." He took it, barely glancing. "Thanks. We've got a table for the gifts. I'll put this with the others." Esther stood there for a second too long, her hand still outstretched after he'd taken the box. People brushed past her, polite nods, thin smiles. She caught sight of Lena, beautiful, elegant Lena, in a silky floral dress, her hair curled perfectly. Lena waved absently, more at the idea of a guest than the reality of a mother-in-law. "Come on," Jared said, motioning with his head. "Let me show you your seat." They walked past the main seating area, a long table under the canopy with name cards and fresh flowers. Another table closer to the patio for family. And then farther still beyond the shade and center, past the folding tables for kids, past the gift table. And finally, this one, he said, pointing to a small round table next to the grill. It was metal. No tablecloth, just one chair, no place card. A few flies hovered lazily near the ketchup bottle. The grill sizzled behind it, unmanned for the moment, but still radiating a steady stream of heat. Charcoal smell and grease. Esther stared at the seat. "Here." "Yeah, sorry, it's just with the layout and the photos and Lena's parents and her sisters. You know how it is. There's not much space." "There's space over there," she said quietly, nodding toward the main table. Jared's jaw tensed for half a second. "Mom, please, don't make this a thing." She looked at him, then really looked. This man she'd raised, fed, loved through sickness and success. The boy who once clung to her hand in grocery stores, terrified of being lost. The man who now couldn't make space for her at a party she helped pay for. "I'm not making it a thing," she said. "You already did. Just sit here, please. I'll make sure you get some food." like a staff member, like a helper, not a mother, not a grandmother. He was already walking away. Esther lowered herself slowly into the chair. The metal burned through the back of her dress. She winced, adjusted. People walked by with plates. They smiled that smile, the one reserved for someone older, irrelevant, taking up space. A woman she didn't recognize passed by and whispered to another, "Is she the babysitter?" Esther heard it. Of course she did. She looked down at her wrist. Bara. The wedding ring was gone. She'd sold it 2 months ago. Quietly. Took it to a pawn shop 3 towns over. It hadn't fetched much more sentimental than gold, but enough to cover the cake and a portion of the tent rental. She never told Jared, didn't want it to feel like a trade, didn't want the day to be about her. But now, sitting there with the sun hitting the side of her face, next to the grill, next to the flies and the ketchup bottle and the hum of disregard, she regretted not making it about her, because clearly no one else would. She watched as Ava was carried around from guest to guest. Pink tulle dress, barefoot, smiling wide. People took pictures, laughed, clapped. Jared kissed the baby on the cheek. Lena posed beside him. They didn't look in her direction once. Esther sat very still. She wasn't angry, not yet. Anger would come later when she had time to name what she was feeling. But now in that moment, it was something colder, deeper. The quiet realization of being unnecessary, a guest at a table with no name. A woman no longer needed for who she was, only for what she could provide. She had given Jared her body to be born from her hours, to be raised by her savings, to be launched by. And still he couldn't give her a seat near the shade. Esther folded her hands in her lap. There was a stain on her dress, small but visible right near the hem, probably from the iron. She smoothed it out with her palm. Behind her, the grill flared back to life. No one noticed. They were too busy smiling into cameras, raising glasses, and making memories that for most of them would begin and end in a photo album they'd scroll past in a year. She closed her eyes, and for the briefest second, she imagined herself walking back through the archway, out into the street, into her car, and driving away. No explanation, no tears, just motion. But she stayed, because she still hoped somewhere deep, foolish, buried, that maybe Ava would wander over. Maybe Jared would remember. Maybe someone would say, "That's Esther. That's the reason we're all here." The wind shifted, carried a snatch of Jared's voice from across the yard. "She's just here because she helped pay for it." It was spoken casually, offhand, but she heard it. And suddenly the heat from the grill wasn't the only thing burning. She sat up straighter, one hand still on her wrist, the other clenched in her lap. She would remember this moment, etch it into bone. Because one day when all the photos faded and the tulle dress was boxed away and the balloons deflated, Jared would need something from her again. And on that day she would remember the seat by the grill. And who gave it to her? That night Esther didn't sleep. She got home just after 9. The kitchen was dark, quiet, familiar. She placed her purse gently on the table like it might shatter if it touched too hard. The silence in her apartment wrapped around her like an old shawl, one you didn't remember putting on, but somehow always wore. She poured a glass of water, sat, didn't drink. Her dress still smelled faintly of grilled meat and cheap perfume. She didn't bother changing. Across the table sat the empty chair where Harold used to sit. Her husband. Gone nearly 20 years now. A man of few words but warm eyes. He would have said something tonight. He wouldn't have let her sit alone by the grill. He wouldn't have looked away when strangers mistook her for the help. Esther stared at that chair for a long moment. Then she stood up, moved quietly toward the hall closet, and reached behind the coats beneath the old linens and boxes marked winter past the umbrella that always leaked, and the broken radio she could never throw out. Her fingers found it, the small square tin box wrapped in duct tape. She carried it back to the kitchen table, sat. Peeled off the tape slowly, like removing a bandage from something that no longer bled but still ached. Inside letters, drawings, photographs, a small purple hair clip, a paper butterfly, and on top one worn photo of a little girl. Dark-skinned, wide eyes, missing front teeth. Her smile crooked, one pigtail slightly undone. The name Kiana scribbled on the back in a child's hand. Esther's breath hitched. She ran her fingers along the photo's edge. The corners had curled from time, but the memory was sharp. As sharp as the first time she'd seen that little face through the rusted chain-link fence of the ICE detention center. It was 2003. Esther had been volunteering with a local church group. Twice a week they made the 2-hour drive to a makeshift holding facility outside El Paso, a converted warehouse filled with children. Children who didn't speak English. Children separated from parents. Children who cried through the night and clung to plastic bags filled with their only belongings. Esther hadn't been prepared. She'd imagined something less brutal. A school-like setting. Cots, perhaps. Instead, she found cages, steel fencing, mattresses on floors, screaming, silence, grief in toddler form, and in one corner, Kiana. She was 6, thin as a wire, curled into herself like she was trying to disappear. No paperwork, no family name, no one to claim her. She didn't talk for the first week, just stared. Esther remembered bringing her a peanut butter sandwich she hadn't eaten in 2 days. Kiana took it in both hands like it was glass. Ate slowly, no crumbs. That night, Esther drove home and cried in the car until her vision blurred. She told Jared about her briefly. There's this girl she'd said over dinner. No one's come for her. She doesn't speak. Jared had been 18 then. Angry, restless, already thinking about leaving for Chicago. Why are you getting involved? We don't have space. We don't have money. She's a child, Esther said. She's not your child. Esther didn't reply, because he was right, and also completely wrong. The second week, Kiana drew a picture with a blue crayon. A stick figure with curly hair and a big smile standing next to a smaller figure holding a balloon. Underneath, she'd scrawled 3 crooked letters, M-O-M. That was the day everything changed. Esther started coming more often, staying longer. She brought books, dolls, coloring pencils. Slowly, Kiana began to talk, first in fragments, then sentences. She called Esther Abuela before she ever said her own name clearly. One afternoon, Kiana developed a fever. High, relentless, shaking. The guards said it was fine kids get sick. They gave her Tylenol and left her on a cot. Esther wasn't a nurse, but she was a mother. And mothers know when a child is too still. She stayed with her all night, drenched rags in cool water, sang softly, held her hand. At some point, Kiana whimpered something in a language Esther didn't understand, but the sound was universal. It was, "Don't leave me," and she didn't. By week 6, the paperwork started. A sympathetic caseworker, a legal loophole, a distant relative who backed out. Esther stepped forward. "I'll foster her," she said. Jared had screamed when she told him, "You're out of your mind. What about money? What about me? You're 18, you're leaving. You're choosing her over me." "No," she said. "I'm choosing not to abandon someone who already has nothing." "You're replacing me." "No, Jared, I'm remembering who I am." He hadn't spoken to her for 2 weeks, but Kiana had come home, quietly, without celebration. No balloons, no cake, just an air mattress and warm soup, a pair of pajamas 3 sizes too big and a nightlight shaped like a turtle. And in the middle of the night, a small body curling beside Esther, her fingers clutching the fabric of her nightgown. They lived like that for almost a year. Esther didn't tell many people. Jared had made his disapproval clear. And there was always the risk, immigration authorities, custody changes, Kiana being taken away again. So Esther kept it private. A quiet life inside the walls of a small apartment. Kiana thrived. She learned English quickly, loved books, called Esther Mom sometimes, Abuela other times. She helped cook, danced in the living room to old records, hummed while doing homework. And then just as suddenly she was gone. Not because she wanted to be, but because of the system. A more permanent placement became available, a foster family in Arizona, better suited, they said. A long-term solution. Esther had no legal claim. The adoption process had stalled, and she didn't fight. Not because she didn't love Kiana, but because Kiana had learned to trust. And maybe trusting someone else would be okay too. They cried. Both of them. Kiana gave her the purple hair clip. Esther gave her the paper butterfly. They wrote letters for years after that, But time stretches, letters get fewer, then Christmas cards, then nothing. Esther never forgot her, not once. And now, sitting at her kitchen table 2 decades later, holding that photo again, the feelings came flooding back. Not just the love, the guilt of having let go, of choosing silence to keep peace, of never telling Jared that he wasn't an only child anymore, not by blood, but by love, that he had a sister once. A sister who saw his mother not as a burden or a wallet or an image to curate, but as home. Esther took a shaky breath, picked up one of the old letters. The ink had faded slightly, but the handwriting was unmistakable. Loopy, childlike, full of effort. "Dear Abuela," it began. "I miss you a lot. My new room has yellow walls. I think you'd like it. I drew you a cat. His name is Boots. I love you even if you're far away. Love, Kiana." She put it down. Her eyes were wet, her tea cold, her wrist still bare. She opened a new tab on her phone. Typed into the search bar, Dr. Kiana Josephine Carter, Alaska. A hospital page loaded, a staff profile. There she was, older now, stronger. Hair pulled back in a neat ponytail, confident eyes, the same crooked smile. Esther reached out and touched the screen. Whispered, "You grew up." She hesitated, then pressed the call button. It rang twice, then again. Then a voice answered. Professional, warm. Dr. Carter speaking. Esther froze. "Hello," the voice said again. Esther cleared her throat. "Kiana." A pause. "Yes, who is this?" "This is Esther," she said softly. "Esther Myles." There was silence, then breath, then Abuela. Her voice cracked on the second syllable. "Yes," Esther whispered. "It's me." "Oh my God," Kiana said. "Oh my God, I've looked for you. I didn't know where you were. I thought..." Her voice trembled. "I'm here, Abuela. I'm a doctor now. I have a house, a husband. I never stopped thinking about you." Esther closed her eyes, and for the first time in a long time, she felt like someone again. "I need to tell you something," she said, "about today. About Jared. About how I was seated by the grill." And she did. Everything. Kiana listened, didn't interrupt. And when Esther finished, her voice raw and thin, Kiana spoke 4 words that changed everything. "Come live with me." Esther smiled, then cried. And just like that, something long dead inside her began to breathe again. The kitchen light buzzed overhead, flickering slightly, the way it always did when the house felt too quiet. Esther sat at the small table, both hands folded in her lap, like she was waiting for something to be handed to her. But nothing came. Not an apology. Not recognition. Not love. What had come was silence, thick and constant. The photograph of Kiana lay before her, the one she'd just pulled from the tin box. Her younger self with the crooked smile and the scuffed chin, the background of the picture yellowed with age. Esther stared at it for a long moment, and then she reached for her phone. Her fingers hovered over the keypad like they didn't quite trust what she was about to do. She'd never called before. All these years. Letters, yes. A birthday card once or twice. But a voice, her voice. That was something she'd denied them both. But tonight felt different, like something ancient had cracked open. She opened the browser and retyped the name, Dr. Kiana Josephine Carter. There it was again, OB-GYN Anchorage Women's Health Center. A small hospital portrait stared back at her, older, grown, polished and sure, but still those same kind eyes. Esther's thumb hovered, then pressed the number listed under office. It rang. Once, twice, a woman answered. "Anchorage Women's Health, this is Jenny. How can I help you?" Esther's throat tightened. I'm looking for Dr. Kiana Carter, please. It's not a patient matter. It's personal. I can try to transfer you to her line. She's with a patient right now, but she might be finishing up." A click, a brief silence, then another ring. Esther closed her eyes. 1 ring, 2, 3, click. "Dr. Carter speaking." The voice that answered was calm, clipped, professional. Esther couldn't speak. For a beat too long, she just breathed. "Hello," Kiana asked again, the slightest edge creeping into her tone. "Is anyone there?" Esther's voice came out smaller than she expected. "Kiana." Pause. A long one. Then, "Who is this?" Esther, she said. Esther Myles. Dead silence. But Esther could hear it softly, unmistakably, the breath catching, the gasp held back. Then came the words so quiet Esther almost thought she imagined them. Abuela. A single word weighted with years. Yes, Esther whispered. It's me. Oh my God, Kiana said, and her voice broke halfway through. I've looked for you. I didn't know where you were. I didn't know if you were. I'm here, Esther said. Still here. You're calling me, Kiana said softly. After all this time. Esther closed her eyes, her throat thick. I saw your photo today. Online. You've become everything I thought you would, and more. There was laughter then, but it was choked with tears. You used to draw pictures of me wearing a stethoscope. Remember. I remember everything Esther said. Everything about you. Your first sentence in English. Your obsession with pancakes. The time you made me a necklace out of dried macaroni. Kiana sniffled. I still have that photo you drew of me. The one with the butterfly wings. It's framed in my hallway. Esther smiled, truly smiled for the first time that day. I hoped you'd still have it. I still call you Mom sometimes, Kiana said, voice cracking. Not out loud, just in my head, when I need to feel brave. That broke something in Esther. I should have called you sooner, she said. I wanted to. I didn't want to interfere. Kiana took a shaky breath. Abuela, you never interfered. You saved me. And then Esther spoke softly but clearly. I need to tell you something. Something that happened today. And I'm ashamed of how long I let it happen. She didn't wait for permission. She began. She told her everything. The party, the placement by the grill. The words Jared said, she's just here because she helped pay for it. She spoke of how the sun burned her back while she watched from a distance as others took photos with her grandchild. How someone asked if she was the babysitter. She did not raise her voice, but her words burned hotter than any fire pit. When she finished, there was only the quiet sound of someone trying not to cry through a phone line. Kiana's voice came out thick and trembling. He really said that? Yes, after everything you've done for him. Esther didn't reply. She didn't need to. I have a guest house, Kiana said suddenly. It's not fancy, but it's warm and it's yours. You come stay with me. I'll fly you out myself. You'll never sit by a grill again unless you want to. Esther laughed through the tears. You don't even know if I snore. You do, like a small engine. You used to fall asleep on the couch while we watched Jeopardy. Oh, so you do remember. I remember everything, Kiana said. I remember you giving me warm milk at night. I remember the sound of your slippers on the kitchen floor. I remember how you made me feel like I wasn't a mistake. Esther swallowed. You never were. I know, Kiana said. Because of you. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full. Heavier than anything spoken before it. Then Esther reached for the envelope on the side table, pulled out the worn, yellowed copy of her will. Her old will. The one that had Jared's name scrawled across every line, the house, the savings, the insurance policy. She held it in both hands. Then slowly, deliberately, she tore it down the middle. And then again, into quarters, into eighths. Kiana heard the sound through the line. What was that? Esther's voice was clear, steady. That was me letting go of what I thought loyalty meant. She stood, walked to the trash, and dropped the pieces inside. You're serious, Kiana said. About everything. I've never been more certain. Kiana was quiet for a long time. Then, I'll send you the ticket tonight, and I'll meet you at the airport. You won't lift a thing. Esther's smile returned. You sound like a mother. Kiana laughed. I've learned from the best. Before they hung up, Kiana said one last thing. I don't care what your blood says, Abuela. You're my family. You always were. And Esther replied, Then it's time I start living like I belong to someone. She hung up, stood in her kitchen, closed her eyes. The silence still wrapped around her, but it no longer felt empty. It felt like a beginning. Monday morning broke over the town with the kind of crisp, unforgiving light that made everything seem sharper, less romantic, more real. Esther stood in front of her mirror in the same cream dress she had worn to the party, the one that had absorbed every insult without a wrinkle. She didn't bother ironing it again. She wanted the creases this time. She wanted to wear the scars. Her purse was already packed. Inside it, a copy of the property deed, a small folder of bank documents, and a velvet pouch with the last of her jewelry, 3 rings, 1 gold bracelet, and a locket containing a photo of Jared when he was 6, taken the day he graduated kindergarten. He'd been missing 1 front tooth, smiling, as if the world would never hurt him. Esther had stared at that photo before zipping it up. It was the only thing of Jared's she was taking with her today. The drive to the law office was quiet. Too quiet. Not even the rattle from her left mirror, usually loose, always humming, disturbed her. It was as if the car, like her, understood the gravity of what was about to happen. The office sat on this corner of Maple and 3rd. Brick-faced with gold lettering on the door, Patterson and Company, Estate and Family Law. She had been here once before, 15 years ago, when Harold passed. Mr. Patterson had guided her through probate like a gentle captain steering a widow through fog. He'd offered her tissues, warm tea, and soft words. Today she needed none of that. She opened the glass door and stepped into the cool interior. Wood-paneled walls, leather chairs, a smell like ink and lemon polish. The receptionist looked up. "Mrs. Myles," the woman said. "He's expecting you. Right this way." Esther followed her into a large book-lined office. Behind a mahogany desk sat Mr. Patterson. Older now, whiter hair, but still with that same calm judicial presence. "Esther," he said, rising, "please have a seat." She nodded, sat across from him, and opened her purse. "I'm ready," she said. Patterson tilted his head, ready to change everything. The will, the trust, the house, the accounts, all of it. He studied her for a moment. "You called my office at 7 a.m. sharp. You said this was urgent. But I want to be clear, this is permanent. You understand that?" "I do. And you want to disinherit your son?" She met his eyes. "My son disinherited me long before I picked up the phone." He didn't push further, just opened the folder on his desk and began reviewing her prior will. "You had previously left the house to Jared Myles," he read, "as well as the primary savings, the insurance policy, and all personal effects. Do you wish to transfer all of this to your new beneficiary?" "I do." "And who is the beneficiary?" Esther reached into her folder and slid across a single document, Kiana's birth certificate folded and worn, with a sticky note that read, "Dr. Kiana Josephine Carter, Anchorage, Alaska." Patterson read it slowly. "She's not your biological daughter." "No," Esther said. "She's better." He gave her a long look, then nodded. "I'll prepare the new documents for signature. We'll transfer the deed for the house immediately. That will trigger a county notification." "I'm aware." "Mrs. Myles," he leaned forward slightly, folding his hands, "I don't mean to question your decision, but in my experience, decisions made in the heat of emotional distress, especially involving family, tend to come with consequences." Esther didn't blink. "Consequences happened on Saturday. This is just the math that follows." He sat back. "Very well." For the next hour she signed. Her signature, Esther L. Myles, flowed with the kind of quiet fury only an old woman betrayed by her own blood could possess. It was not rage on paper, it was resolve. Every document finalized, every account updated, every stitch of her legacy rewritten. Patterson stood as she finished. "We'll file with the county clerk by end of day. The house will appear under Dr. Carter's name by tomorrow morning." Esther nodded. "Good. Let him find out from the system the same way I found out I didn't matter anymore." He walked her to the door. "If you need help drafting a letter explaining the change—" "No letter," she said. "He doesn't deserve my words." Outside, the sky had turned a shade paler, clouds pulling in. Esther stood on the sidewalk and inhaled. She felt taller, not younger, not stronger, just tall enough to hold herself for once. By the time she pulled back into her driveway, her phone had already buzzed once. A text, then another, then a call. She didn't check. She didn't have to. The email hit Jared's inbox at 3:11 p.m. His assistant flagged it as urgent, thinking it was about a new client. But it wasn't. It was a property transfer notice from the county registrar's office, ownership of parcel number 4281, Lakeview property, transferred from Esther L. Myles to Kiana J. Carter. The attached PDF included the notarized deed and a photo of the updated signature. Esther's name bold. Kiana's name brand new. It took Jared 11 minutes to comprehend what had happened. 7 more to curse out loud. He was in his office when it landed. Lena had Ava that day. The house was empty. He read it again and again as if some footnote would appear that said, "Just kidding." Then he called his mother. Voicemail. He called again, then texted. "What the hell is this? Why is the house under someone named Carter? Are you losing it? Call me now." When there was still no response an hour later, he threw his car keys across the room, grabbed the printed deed, and stormed out the door. The drive to Esther's house was 25 minutes of fury, his knuckles white on the wheel. He didn't even turn on the radio. He rehearsed what he'd say, words like betrayal, manipulation, insanity, words she'd hear and feel. When he pulled into the driveway, he didn't bother parking properly. Left his car, crooked engine still ticking, the paper in his hand now damp from sweat. He banged on the door like a collector. The curtains didn't move, no footsteps, then a shadow. The door opened slowly. Esther stood there calm as a tombstone. Jared held up the deed like a weapon. "What is this?" She looked at the paper, then at him. "That she said is what accountability looks like." "Who the hell is Kiana Carter?" "You'll find out soon enough," she replied. "You're good at Googling things. Try that." "You gave away the house?" "I transferred it," she said, "to someone who calls me family without needing to be reminded." "You're insane." "I was," she said softly, "for a very long time." He pushed past her into the living room, didn't ask, didn't pause. Same entitlement as always. Same child who walked in and made demands before checking if anyone was bleeding. Esther closed the door behind him, slow and silent. And for the first time since he was born, she didn't ask him to stay for dinner. She didn't offer him tea. She didn't ask if he was okay. She let him burn, and for the first time she didn't step into the fire to save him. The pounding on the door started before Esther even reached the hallway. 3 fast knocks, then another 3 harder, like someone trying to break time as well as wood. "Mom," Jared's voice ragged with fury, "open this door, now!" She didn't flinch. She had expected this. Not today, perhaps not this early, but eventually. This kind of man, this kind of entitled hurt was always punctual. She took her time walking to the door. Let him stew. Let him feel the absence of immediate obedience. When she opened it, Jared was standing there in his work clothes, pressed shirt, now wrinkled, a folder clutched in one hand, and a face twisted in disbelief and rage. His tie was loose, his hair flattened from the heat of the car. But it was the eyes that caught her, wide, red, wild, as if something holy had been stolen from him. "Who the hell is Kiana Josephine Carter?" he barked. Esther stood with her hands folded neatly in front of her. "She's the person you never asked about. Not once." Jared pushed past her again like the last time, as if her house, now legally no longer his concern, still owed him entry. "You gave her the house. You gave away my inheritance." His voice cracked upward, too shrill to be fully controlled. "To some stranger, some outsider." Esther closed the door with a slow click behind him. She said nothing. He turned to face her, waving the printed deed in his hand like it was an eviction notice for his pride. "You think this is okay? This betrayal, after everything I've done for you?" She looked at him, really looked, and saw a man who still believed love was transactional. She moved past him toward the kitchen. Calm, measured. "Would you like some tea? Don't play that with me. You don't get to be calm right now. Not after this." "I'm not calm for you," she said. "I'm calm for me." Jared's voice dropped an octave. "You know what this looks like, right? Giving property to someone not even in the family. Legally, this is going to raise questions." "Good," Esther said, pulling a mug from the cabinet. "Let them ask." He scoffed. "You think this is funny? I think it's overdue." He slammed the folder on the kitchen table. "You gave away our family home." She poured hot water into the mug. The tea bag floated like a lifeboat. "Our family," he said again, biting down on the words. "That house," Esther replied, "hasn't felt like a family home since your father died. And since you stopped visiting, stopped calling, and started treating me like a background extra in your photo ops, it's just been walls." "She's not even blood," Jared shouted. Esther turned around slowly, tea mug in hand. "Neither is Ava. But I still gave up my wedding ring to pay for her birthday party." He flinched. "You want to talk about blood?" she continued. "Fine. Blood tells you where you come from. Love tells you where you belong. You haven't made me feel like I belonged in years." Jared swallowed. His anger flared, but it had no place to go. "She manipulated you," he said. "She must have. Reached out, twisted things. Played the victim. Kiana hasn't spoken to me in years. I called her." "You what?" "I found her myself." After sitting next to a grease-stained grill while you told your wife's family I was just there because I wrote a check. I never said. You did. I heard you, word for word. The room grew thick. Jared opened his mouth, then closed it. The papers on the table fluttered as a gust of wind slipped through the slightly cracked window. Esther moved to the kitchen sink and looked out the window into the backyard. Do you remember that pear tree? She asked. Jared blinked. What? That one. Right there. She pointed to the far corner of the yard where a gnarled, aging tree stood. Its bark flaked like peeling paint, but its branches were still full. Clusters of small green fruit hung like promises. You planted it with your father, she said. You were 9. You both had dirt up to your knees. Jared softened slightly, his eyes flickering. You've never watered it, she said, not once. So Kiana did. When she stayed here. She was 6. She asked me every week how it was doing. Sent me letters from Arizona asking if the fruit had come in. Asked if I covered it during the frost. She drew me pictures of it. That tree mattered to her. He was silent. She cared, Esther said, because she saw this house as something living, not something owed to her. She wasn't here, he muttered. She wasn't around when I scraped by to get through college, when I broke my back building a life. Esther turned to him then. Her face wasn't angry. It was exhausted. You called me when you needed money, Jared. Not advice, not presence. You called me when something broke or someone else disappointed you. You needed a fixer, not a mother. I built a career. I built you. Silence. You were never alone, she continued. I was there for every scraped knee, every school form, every parent-teacher conference. You got my time, my sweat, my sacrifice. Kiana never got any of that. She got a mattress on a floor and a heart that was already worn out. But she gave me love I didn't have to earn. Jared stepped back. She's a stranger, he said again, but weaker now. No, Esther said. She's the only person in years who's made me feel like I'm not invisible. Jared turned to the window. The pear tree shimmered under the soft afternoon sun. I thought I'd inherit that house, he said. You thought wrong. He turned to her, eyes sharp again. You raised me, and now you're erasing me. I'm not erasing you. I'm letting you be who you've chosen to be. He looked down. You think I'm the villain here, he said. I think you stopped being a son the day you started managing my image. That hit. Deeper than he admitted. He folded his arms, unfolded them, looked at the deed again. She gets everything, Esther nodded. The house, the savings, the jewelry, even the photographs. I'm giving it to someone who might actually show them to her kids one day. Jared's lip curled. This is punishment. No, Esther said, stepping closer. This is realignment. You pulled the thread loose. I'm just letting the fabric fall. And then, without waiting for a response, she walked past him, placed the tea on the table, and sat down. He remained standing, paper in hand. The air between them 1,000 unspoken versions of what could have been. And for the first time in his life, Jared didn't know if he could fix this. Because for the first time he was standing in a house that was no longer his future. And the woman before him, his mother, was no longer waiting to be chosen. She already had been. The examination room was small but warm, soft beige walls, a sunlit window, a mobile of wooden birds hanging above the patient chair. It was the kind of space designed to put women at ease. Quiet, safe. Kiana had always believed that healing wasn't just about medicine. It was about presence. She glanced at the chart one more time before knocking gently. Come in, came the voice inside, quiet, uncertain. Kiana entered with a gentle smile and a clipboard in hand. But the moment her eyes landed on the woman sitting on the table, something shifted. Lena, she said, surprised. Lena looked up. Her eyes, those polished, always composed hazel eyes, widened in slow recognition. Her hair was different now, no longer curled into expensive waves but pulled back in a messy bun. No designer necklace, no silk blouse, just a plain cardigan, jeans, and a kind of fatigue that clung to her skin like a second layer. Kiana, Lena asked, blinking like she wasn't sure if the name fit the face. Kiana stepped in composed but not cold. Yes, it's been a long time. Lena swallowed hard. I didn't realize. I got referred here through the clinic's outreach program. They said I qualified because I'm a single mother and uninsured. Kiana nodded. That's what it's for. The silence thickened, but not with animosity, just confusion. Lena hesitated. The program. They said it was part of something called the Esther Myles Fund. Kiana's eyes softened. Yes, it's named after my mother. Lena sat up straighter, her brow furrowing. Your mother. Kiana didn't correct her, not right away, because in every way that mattered it was true. She was the woman who raised me, Kiana said. Not because she had to, not because there was blood or paperwork, just because she saw me, she chose me, she chose. Lena's lips parted slightly, a pause. Then she let out a long, quiet breath. That's Jared's mother. Kiana nodded once. Yes. A storm of emotion moved across Lena's face. Confusion, recognition, something like shame. I had no idea, she whispered. You weren't supposed to, Kiana replied gently. It wasn't public. But after she transferred the house to me, I sold it and used every cent to start this fund for women who were left holding everything while the ones who made the mess walked away. Lena looked down at her hands, now fidgeting in her lap. It paid for Ava's daycare this month, she said. And my prescription. It paid for this appointment. I didn't know I was taking help from her, from Esther. Kiana stepped forward, checking the blood pressure monitor out of habit, giving Lena space to speak without being stared at. She was kind to me, Lena said softly. But I was never kind back. Not really. I was too busy trying to impress Jared's world to remember who built his roots. She's not keeping score, Kiana said. I might, Lena whispered. Kiana paused. Then she placed the stethoscope gently against Lena's back. Deep breath in. Lena inhaled. The room was quiet again except for the soft rhythm of breath and heartbeats. When the exam was finished, Kiana sat down on the small stool beside the chair. She never wanted recognition, she said. But I thought, if I could help someone feel less invisible, just one woman maybe, she wouldn't feel like her life disappeared behind the people she lifted up. Lena blinked quickly. Well, you did. You helped me, even before I knew who was behind it. Kiana smiled. Lena added, voice thinner now. Does Jared know? Kiana hesitated. About the fun, no. About me. Now he does. Lena exhaled through her nose, almost a laugh. I'm sure that went over like a lead balloon. It was overdue, Kiana said. He thought inheritance was an entitlement. I think it's a mirror. Lena stared at her. He's not the same since the divorce. But I can't say I am either. People change when things break, Kiana said. The question is whether they rebuild with the same bricks. Lena's eyes welled up. Not quite tears, but the kind of glaze that appears when someone hears something too true. Kiana stood. Come back next week. The clinic will cover your medication through the end of the year. Lena nodded, standing slowly. Thank you. As she reached the door, she turned back. Do you think she'd want to see Ava again? Kiana didn't answer right away. I think she said carefully that Ava's the only one who never made her feel unwanted. Lena's throat worked hard to swallow emotion. Then she nodded and slipped out the door. Outside the exam room, the sun had dropped low over the parking lot. A soft amber glow lit the cars like they were part of a movie set. Jared sat in his car across the street. Engine off, AC off, just him. The paper deed still in the glove compartment, now creased, coffee-stained, angry. He hadn't come to confront her. Not today. He didn't know why he was even there. He had told himself it was to understand, to see if she'd really done it, if she'd really started a fund in his mother's name and handed it everything to someone else. But when he saw Lena exit the building with Ava bouncing on her hip, he froze. They looked different, simpler, but somehow freer. He hadn't seen Ava in nearly 2 weeks. Lena had stopped responding to his messages, tired of excuses, tired of control masked as concern. Kiana followed a few moments later. No lab coat now, just jeans, a button-down shirt, and a bag slung over her shoulder. She bent down and kissed Ava on the forehead. Ava squealed and reached up to pull at her curls, and Jared, sitting behind the windshield, couldn't move. He didn't expect the tenderness. Didn't expect Ava to look so safe in her arms. Didn't expect his ex-wife and the woman he once labeled not family to laugh like sisters at something Ava garbled. He didn't step out of the car. He didn't wave. But something behind his ribs shifted. Not guilt, not yet. But maybe the slow decay of arrogance. He watched until they disappeared into the lot, the sunlight catching in Ava's curls as she was hoisted onto Lena's shoulders. And still Jared didn't move, because for the first time in his life he saw what legacy looked like from the outside. And he realized it didn't come with a deed, or a will, or blood. It came with choice, and someone else had been chosen, not him, not this time, and maybe, just maybe, not ever again. The air in Anchorage had a different kind of stillness, not the kind Esther had known back home where silence felt heavy and filled with things left unsaid. This silence was clean, crisp, like a room you could finally breathe in. It had been 2 weeks since she arrived in Alaska, 2 weeks since she stepped off the plane and into Kiana's embrace, into a house that smelled like cinnamon and sandalwood, where laughter echoed down the hallway and the heater clicked to life like it had purpose. The guest house was small, just 1 bedroom, a kitchenette, and a reading nook by the window. But it was hers. And more than that, it was offered freely. No strings, no obligations. No one handing her a seat near the kitchen like she didn't matter. Kiana had stocked the fridge before she came, folded towels, set out a vase of wildflowers. On the nightstand, a framed photo, the same drawing Esther had once made of her as a child, butterfly wings and all. It was like stepping into a room someone had built for her heart to rest. Most mornings, Esther woke before dawn, made coffee, and stood by the window. She liked watching the sun drag itself over the horizon like it too was relearning how to show up. Kiana would knock around 7. Pancakes or tamales, she'd ask, teasing. Esther always said both, but it was the afternoon visits that became her favorite. That's when Ava came. She arrived wrapped in a purple parka, 2 sizes too big, her cheeks red from the cold, and her curls tucked under a knitted cap. She ran toward Esther every time like they had known each other forever. "Ba-Noi!" she screamed, her toddler voice warbling with joy. Esther hadn't expected it the first time. Ba-Noi, Kiana had explained later, it means grandma in Vietnamese. One of Ava's daycare friends calls his grandma that, and now she thinks it's your title too. Esther hadn't corrected her. She didn't care what name Ava used. But the next day Ava switched it up. "Ba-Noi, Ba-Noi cookie." Esther had handed her a snickerdoodle the day before, and that was it. From then on she became Grandma Cookie. It was ridiculous and perfect. Kiana rolled her eyes, but Esther didn't care. No one had ever named her with such affection before, not even Jared. She took to baking every Thursday. Peanut butter cookies, lemon bars, sometimes just warm tortillas with cinnamon and sugar. And Ava would sit on the counter, her tiny feet kicking rhythmically as she waited, flour dusting her eyelashes like snow. Esther began to feel useful again, not needed in the way she used to be called on when something broke or when a check needed writing, but in the quiet, soul-healing way that said you matter simply because you're here. The mail came every afternoon like a heartbeat, and one day, among the bills and the donation letters and the glossy grocery flyers, there was something else, an envelope. From Jared, not handwritten, not stamped, but an email printed out by Kiana and slid quietly across the table as Esther folded laundry. "You don't have to read it," she said. "But I thought you'd want to know." Esther dried her hands, picked up the paper. The subject line read request. The message was short. "Mom, I know I don't have a right to ask. Not after what I said, not after what I didn't say. I'm not even sure you'll read this, but I need to know. If I came to visit, would you make me leave? Or is there still a place at your table? Jared." Esther read it 3 times. Then she folded it carefully and placed it in the drawer beside the sink. She didn't respond. But the next morning, when she set the table for breakfast, tamales and eggs and fresh coffee, she laid out an extra plate, said nothing, just set the fork beside it with the same care she used to place notes in Jared's lunchbox when he was 8. That afternoon, Ava returned with a new drawing. She ran through the front door, boots half-tied, cheeks flushed, and slammed a crumpled paper onto the table like it was a declaration. "Me, Mommy, Grandma Cookie." Kiana laughed. "Where's Daddy?" Ava pointed to the corner of the paper where a stick figure was drawn floating above the others, disconnected. "He's in the sky," Kiana teased. "No," Ava said solemnly. "He's at work." Esther looked at the figure, just a circle with 2 lines, no hands, no feet. She folded the paper, slowly smiled, and said, "Let's make more cookies." Later that night, Esther sat alone in the guest house. The moon glowed over the snow-dusted pines outside, the branches swaying like they were whispering something she hadn't heard in years. She made tea, She sat in her armchair by the window, and she thought about the email. Jared had always been late to emotion. He processed things after the fire had died when the wreckage lay bare. She didn't hate him for it, but she no longer pitied him either. She wondered if he meant it, or if it was just another attempt at proximity, at comfort. But she couldn't shake Ava's drawing. Daddy floating, disconnected. And it occurred to her Jared hadn't fallen from grace. He had drifted, years ago, slowly, silently, like vapor leaving a cup of coffee. She had just refused to admit how cold the cup had become. But here now in Alaska, in the hum of this new home, things were warm again. She didn't know what she would say to him if he ever showed up. She didn't know if she'd let him stay long. But she knew deep in her bones that she didn't owe him pain. Just boundaries, just truth. And that started with setting the table, one plate at a time, even if no one came. 2 days later, a package arrived. No return address. Inside it, a box of teas from a boutique shop in Chicago and a note. "These are the ones you used to like. I wasn't sure if you still did. I never asked. Jay." Esther smiled faintly. She brewed one that night. Cinnamon pear, just like the tree he never watered. And she drank it alone in a home that wasn't filled with ghosts, but with people who remembered how to say her name with love. It began as a routine audit. Kiana had grown used to skimming the fund reports every week, mostly to track donations, review patient outreach, and make sure the clinic bills matched what she approved. But this time something didn't line up. A flagged transaction, then 3 more. Amounts that weren't large enough to cause panic on their own, but strung together, they made a pattern. Withdrawals timed just before clinic payroll, redirected reimbursements, a vendor payment routed to a different account. Kiana frowned, sitting at her laptop late that night, eyes narrowing behind her glasses. She clicked through each entry again, more slowly this time. Each unauthorized activity was subtle, almost careful. Whoever had done it knew how to stay below alarm thresholds, but they weren't invisible. She called the clinic's IT administrator the next morning. "Check the login logs from last month," she asked. "Specifically from the external terminal in exam room 3. I think someone used it when I wasn't there." An hour later, she had her answer. A device had connected under her profile 2 weeks ago. Same day, Jared had visited unannounced with documents to sign for his health coverage. He'd sat in the office while she went to check on a patient. At the time, it hadn't felt suspicious. But now her stomach curled. She printed the audit logs and drove straight to Esther's. Esther stood at the counter in her soft slippers, hands deep in a bowl of dough when Kiana entered. "Are you okay?" she asked, wiping her hands on a towel. "I need you to look at something." Kiana spread the pages across the dining table like a deck of accusations. Esther scanned the rows quickly. She didn't need much explanation. Her brows furrowed, mouth tightening in a way Kiana rarely saw. This can't be real," Esther said. "I checked it 3 times. Kiana said quietly. The only other person who used that terminal was Jared. Esther leaned on the edge of the table. "Why would he do this? I don't know. Maybe to find something he could use in court to challenge the fund or prove that I'm unfit to run it." A long silence stretched between them. "Have you told him?" Esther finally asked. "No, not yet." "Then we will." The lawyer's office smelled of lemon polish and formality. Esther had requested a full review of the fund's articles of incorporation. Kiana sat across the table with a folder in her lap. Jared arrived last, wearing a wool coat he didn't remove, jaw already clenched before anyone spoke. "Why am I here?" he asked. "We have a problem," Kiana said evenly, "and we need to get in front of it." She passed him a copy of the audit. Jared skimmed it, brow furrowing. "You think I did this?" he snapped. "You used my login the day you were at the clinic. I checked my emails. You accessed fund records." "By accident." Kiana folded her arms. "Or curiosity," Esther said softly. Jared turned to her, eyes wide. "You believe I'd do this, that I'd steal from a charity named after you. You once told me it was an insult that I gave anything to a stranger," Esther said. "What you're capable of when your pride is bruised, I'm not sure anymore." Jared shoved the papers back across the table. "This is a witch hunt." But then the lawyer cleared his throat. "I ran a trace," he said. "Bank flagged a routing address linked to a secondary account. Belongs to a woman named Lena Hart." Silence. Kiana froze. Esther's eyes sharpened. Jared blinked. "Lena, my ex-wife." The lawyer nodded. She rerouted the vendor payments to an account in her name. The activity started 6 weeks ago, just after the custody paperwork arrived in her mailbox. Jared stood up, face red with confusion and disbelief. That doesn't make sense, doesn't it? Esther said quietly. Later that evening, Kiana found Lena outside the daycare. She was sitting in her car, hands gripping the steering wheel, eyes unfocused. You know why I'm here, Kiana said, knocking gently on the window. Lena didn't look surprised. Just tired. She rolled it down. I wasn't going to keep it. Kiana didn't reply. I panicked, Lena said. He'd sent me a message hinting at new custody filings. Said he'd prove I was living off strangers, that I was unstable. So you gave him proof? Lena's eyes welled. No. I was trying to control the narrative. I figured if I could just buy time, reroute a few things, stabilize the budget, maybe it wouldn't get ugly. It was theft, I know, she said, voice breaking, and I'm sorry. Kiana stood still, arms crossed, breath fogging in the cold. You know, she said finally, I've spent most of my life being the outsider, the one people thought didn't belong, and the one woman who gave me belonging, Esther. You used her name to commit a crime. Lena shook her head, crying now. I wasn't thinking clearly. No, Kiana said. You were. That's the problem. She turned to leave. Please, Lena called. Don't tell Ava. Kiana paused. I won't, she said. But one day Ava will ask why her mother almost lost everything, and you'll have to decide which version of yourself she deserves to know. At Esther's house, the fire was low in the hearth. Jared stood near it, hands in his coat pockets, staring into the flames. She did it, he said quietly. Esther nodded. I didn't know. I believe you, she said. He looked at her. Then why do I feel like I'm still the one who lost? Esther picked up her knitting again, the needles clicking gently. Because you want to be trusted, she said. But you haven't done much living that makes you worthy of it. He swallowed. She looked up. Trust isn't about blood, or even history. It's about what you do when no one's watching. I'm trying, he said. I know, she replied. But try quieter. Try humbler. Try again when the trying costs you something. He sat down, and for the first time didn't argue, because deep down he knew he wasn't the victim, not this time. And if he ever wanted to earn back the name son, it would have to start with a kind of honesty he had never shown before, even to himself. The first time Jared walked into the foundation office with a laptop tucked under his arm and a quiet apology on his lips, no one clapped. No one greeted him with open arms. And that felt right. He didn't deserve a ceremony. He deserved the silence he walked into, and he knew it. But he stayed. He stayed after hours to reorganize donor files. He stayed through the awkward pauses between him and Kiana, the ones thick with history neither of them could rewrite. He stayed while Lena kept her distance, and while his mother said little, but watched everything. Jared had always been good with numbers, though. A mind trained in spreadsheets and forecasts, the kind of intelligence that once ran a real estate office into a corner and then back out of it. Now he used it for vendor negotiations, cost reduction strategies. He helped reallocate funds to support more single mothers in rural towns, built a new interface for the donation page that boosted traffic. Kiana watched, quietly. She didn't compliment him. She didn't trust him. But she allowed him in, and that was more than he expected. One Tuesday morning, Jared arrived before the staff did. He printed flyers for an upcoming clinic event. He brewed the coffee. And then he did something no one saw coming. He updated the website's About Us page. He moved Esther's name to the top. Included her photo, the one where she's mid-laugh with Ava on her lap. He added Kiana's story, not in full, but enough to let donors know why the fund bore such a name. He also included Lena with a line about patient advocacy and survivor resilience. He didn't mention himself, but he added one last name at the bottom, Ava Lane, future voice of compassion. Ava came to the office often now, after daycare before Kiana's late shifts. She'd bring her coloring books, her snack pouches, her endless questions. That afternoon she came with a drawing. She pulled it from her backpack, her fingers still sticky from apple slices, and laid it gently on Jared's desk. Look, she beamed. 3 women, all smiling. Stick figure bodies, triangle dresses, messy hair like fireflies. Who's that? Jared asked. Ava pointed. That's Grandma Cookie, and that's Dr. Kiana, and that's Mommy. Jared looked at the trio, all women who had stood in the flames and come out carrying something whole. And where's Daddy? He asked softly. Ava thought. Then she flipped the page, drew a tree, just a tree, roots long and tangled. "You're this one," she said. Jared stared at it. He wanted to ask why a tree, but the lump in his throat didn't let him. She hugged his neck and skipped out of the office. Later that week, Jared asked Esther if she wanted to go somewhere, where she asked, glancing up from her embroidery. He didn't answer, just waited. She said nothing more, but the next morning she wore her brown coat, the one with the stitched cuffs, and stood by the door with her thermos in hand. They didn't speak much during the drive. The road wound through frozen pines alongside silver lakes and patches of sky so wide it made the car feel like a speck on a map drawn by gods. They pulled up to a familiar house, familiar only to Jared. It was his childhood home, Esther's old place, still standing, still painted pale yellow with navy trim, still holding the echoes of bedtime stories and burned toast and slammed doors. Jared parked across the street and turned off the engine. Esther looked at the house. She didn't say a word. Jared stared too. The front steps were chipped now. A new family had moved in. There were toys on the lawn, a tiny pink scooter tipped over by the mailbox. "I thought about buying it," Jared said quietly. "Last year, before all this." Esther didn't look at him. "Why didn't you?" "Because I didn't know why I wanted it," he said. "And I was scared of the answer." The silence stretched full of ache. "I used to think this house made me," Jared added. "The memories, the walls, the photos. But now," he turned to her, "I think it was the people in it, the ones I forgot how to love." Esther blinked. The breeze outside shook a wind chime on the porch. Jared leaned back. "Ava's teaching me," he said, "in ways she doesn't even know." He paused. "I want her to grow up knowing what I didn't." Esther finally looked at him. "And what's that?" "That it's okay to be the child of more than one woman," he said. "To be raised by people who aren't tied by blood but by choice." Esther's eyes filled, not with tears but something deeper. "Recognition. You're doing better," she said softly. He nodded. "I'm trying." She touched his hand, for the first time in years, and he didn't pull away. They sat in silence as the afternoon sun dipped behind the trees. No one spoke of forgiveness, but somehow it was there, in the quiet, in the cracked pavement, in the wind. They stayed until the porch light of the house flicked on, then drove back with the windows down, letting the cold carry away everything that used to rot inside them. They didn't need the old house anymore, because this time they were building something from the inside out. The lights were soft but steady. 100 chairs lined the small community hall, each one filled with someone who had shown up, not because they had to, but because they'd heard something that stirred them. A young woman from Nebraska had driven 6 hours just to be there. A retired teacher from Juneau had flown in, and scattered throughout the audience were nurses, single parents, social workers, volunteers, and a dozen faces that had once sat across from Kiana in exam rooms or counseling chairs, faces etched with exhaustion, but now alert with something resembling hope. The banner at the front read, "The Esther Fund Choosing Family, Building Tomorrow." Kiana stood behind a modest podium. She wore navy today. Not her usual white coat, not her scrub blues, just a soft, simple dress that allowed her to look like who she was, not only a doctor or a director, but a daughter, a fighter, a survivor of systems meant to forget girls like her. She adjusted the mic. "Good evening," she began, voice calm. "Some of you know the name. Some of you knew her story before mine. And some of you are writing your own version of what this work means." She paused, let the room breathe with her. 22 years ago, I was a child in a concrete facility. No country, no mother, no one who even spoke my name with kindness. I was a number in a file, a meal skipped, a shadow. She smiled softly. And then came Esther. Kiana looked down for half a beat, not to gather her thoughts, but to hold them still like fireflies in a jar. She didn't know me. She didn't need to. But she brought soup, and a storybook, and a set of soft pajamas that smelled like lavender, and she said, "You don't need to belong on paper to belong in someone's heart." Murmurs in the audience, a few quiet tears, a few nods. Kiana continued, "Today the Esther Fund has supported over 12,000 women and children across Alaska." And tonight she paused, letting her voice lift. "I'm honored to announce that we are expanding operations into 4 more states: Montana, North Dakota, Idaho, and Utah." Applause, not polite, not obligatory, but real. Hands slapping hands for something that mattered. Kiana waited, and when the noise died down, she said, But that's not the most important part. The room grew still. What matters, she said, is that this fund exists not because someone had money, or power, or a platform, but because someone had love. And that love wasn't tied to blood. It was tied to choice. A hush. She leaned slightly closer to the microphone. Not everyone we're born to knows how to love us. And not everyone we love has to be born to us. She breathed in. Family, she said, is the name you give to the people who stay. In the third row from the back, Esther sat quietly. She hadn't wanted a spotlight tonight. Hadn't even told Kiana she'd be there. Ava, warm and heavy, lay curled against her chest, thumb tucked sleepily into her mouth. Esther rubbed slow circles into her granddaughter's back and listened like she was hearing her own heartbeat echoed in another woman's voice. Kiana glanced toward her, their eyes met. Esther smiled, not big but deep, and beside her Jared sat silently. He hadn't said a word since the lights dimmed. But now, with the applause rising again, he reached over and placed a single hand on his mother's shoulder, not to take credit, not to seek forgiveness, but just to anchor himself to something steady. Esther didn't flinch. She didn't shift away. She just closed her eyes for a moment and leaned the weight of her body into his palm, like she'd been waiting for it. Like that simple act, quiet, unseen by most, was worth more than every speech, every expansion, every dollar raised. Because love without blood, that was the kind that made rooms like this exist, and people like them begin again. The envelope came on a Wednesday, plain cream-colored, no return address. Just her name in Jared's unmistakable handwriting slanted to the right, a little cramped near the edges. Esther held it like it might break. She didn't open it immediately. She brewed a pot of chamomile tea first, washed the 2 cups she always left in the drying rack, fed the blue jay on the windowsill its usual crumbs, and then, only then, she sat by the window, the afternoon light casting long lines across the floor, and broke the seal. It was the first letter her son had ever written her. It began with no greeting, just a line. I didn't know how to say any of this, so I wrote it instead. She read slowly. Jared confessed things she already knew and things she didn't. He spoke of his fear, of the shame he'd carried when he realized he had let pride outgrow love. He spoke of the day he saw Ava laugh in Kiana's arms and wondered if his daughter would grow up with a better man than the one who raised her. He wrote about the house, the one he never bought. The one he now understood wasn't a building, but a woman. He said, I don't want your forgiveness, Mother. I want to earn your name again, one day, somehow. When she finished reading, Esther didn't cry. She wept, not from anger, not from sorrow, but from the weight of something finally shifting, finally letting go, after being held too tightly for too long. She folded the letter, set it on the table, and rose to make 3 cups of tea. The knock on the door was soft, almost hesitant. Kiana stepped inside first, holding a fresh-baked pie from the bakery down the road. Her eyes widened when she saw the kettle already on. You knew, she said. Esther smiled. A mother always does. Jared followed slower, his shoulders not hunched in shame this time, but heavy with something else. A quiet humility, the kind you earn, not adopt. No one said much at first. Kiana set the pie down. Esther poured tea. Jared stood by the window looking out over the yard where snow had just begun to melt into patches of spring. Then Ava's laughter rang from outside, high, wild, uncontained. She was chasing a yellow ball across the yard, feet stumbling, an oversized boot scarf flapping behind her like a flag of freedom. Banot baksi Kiana, catch me. The door flew open and she bounded inside, cheeks flushed, eyes blazing with light. She ran straight to Esther, who scooped her up and spun her gently, both of them laughing, now wind and memory swirling around them. Then Ava turned to Kiana and threw her arms around her. You're warm, she whispered. Kiana held her tighter. Jared watched, said nothing, until Esther looked over Ava's head, met his eyes, and tilted her head toward the kitchen. He understood. He moved, poured tea, added honey the way she used to when he was sick. Set the cups down on the old wooden table, one for each of them. 3 cups, 3 people, 1 story. Ava danced back outside, chasing her ball again, shouting into the air like it could answer her back. And then, for the first time in months, the 3 of them sat together. No accusations, no apologies, just steam rising from mugs and the quiet of something fragile being rebuilt. Later that evening, as the sun slid lower, golden light pouring like syrup across the backyard, Esther stepped out onto the porch. She watched Ava draw in the dirt with a stick carving little hearts and crooked stars. Kiana leaned against the railing beside her. They didn't speak for a while. Then Kiana said, "I used to wish I knew my mother." Esther looked over. But now Kiana added, "I think I did, all along." Esther reached out, touched her cheek. Kiana didn't flinch. And then, as if on cue, Jared stepped out holding a small frame in his hands. "I found this," he said, "in my old boxes." He handed it to Esther. A photo, old, creased at the edges. It was her and Jared years ago, before the divorce, before the bitterness, back when all they had was too little money and too much love. She smiled at it, then turned it around and slowly took the back off. Inside was a second photo, one she had forgotten. A tiny girl, skin the color of cinnamon, smiling with a gap in her teeth and a sunflower in her hair. Kiana, 7 years old. Esther didn't say a word. She just held both photos in her hands and didn't put either in a frame. She laid them side by side on the table inside. No frame, no separation. Just the truth love doesn't always come in one picture. Sometimes it comes in 2, or 3, or 5. Sometimes it comes when you've stopped looking and stayed.